Hi, the purpose of this video is to show how to replace the motor in the EZ-Dry. There is a separate video that shows how to replace the brushes on the motor. This one just shows how to replace the motor itself. Step one on this is to turn the dryer off, pull the hose off, and then to unplug the unit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Turning the unit off. It's good, even if the motor is defective and not functioning, to know that the switch is in the off position by turning it all the way counterclockwise. And then next, pull your hose off, and then of course be sure to unplug the unit. Very important to make sure there's no voltage present on the dryer. I should mention that the replacement of the motor and the brushes, other service on the dryer, really should only be done by a qualified technician. And we actually would do this work at EZ-Groom, replace motors, replace boards, replace brushes, whatever service is necessary on the dryer just by shipping it to our location. We would do that work for you. But if you are a qualified technician, what I'll do real quick is run through the steps on how to get the motor out of here and to get a new motor in. The gross simplification is that there's a speed control that's put in front of and in series with the single phase 115 volt motor. And I'll go through the steps on how to break into this thing, how to get the motor out, how to get and how to unwire and rewire and get it going again. Okay, and with all that said, now before we actually go into the dryer, let's identify the tools we're going to need. We're going to need a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. I like the power screwdrivers. We're going to need a crescent wrench. If there's no crescent wrench available, a set of pliers or robo grips will be fine. We're going to have a pair of wire cutters, a good pair of wire cutters, and then a socket wrench with a 3/8 inch. The socket wrench 3/8 inch socket is preferred, but again you could use the crescent wrench if there's no socket wrench available. And then of course a small flathead screwdriver, 3 wire lugs, wire nuts, and a digital multimeter, and finally the last thing is some duct tape. So with all of these things ready to go, we can go into the dryer. Another thing that is helpful to have is a manual, if you have your dryer manual around. And then if you're into reading circuits, there is a circuit diagram that you can download from the EZ-Groom website, like you can download the manual for the actual circuit diagram. But the circuit diagram really is not needed here. Okay, let's go ahead and dig into this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do on the dryer is to remove the screws on the outer diameter of the housing. I like to start with the ones on the bottom and then work my way around. That way, when I end up with the very last one, I just pull the faceplate right out. A lot of these steps I'm going to explain. We're not actually going to do each single step. Same procedure on the blue one and the pink one, of course. The only difference is the color. So once the last screw is removed, and keep those somewhere where you're not going to lose them, because we're going to need them, of course, later, the faceplate will pull right out. So we pull the faceplate right out of the dryer, separating the box. Our next step is actually going to be now where we're going to use that small, tiny little screwdriver. So then we're going to get that knob off using the screwdriver, and then once the knob is off, behind there is going to be a nut that's holding the potentiometer onto the faceplate. We back the nut off, and then that potentiometer can be pulled off of the faceplate completely. Keep that small little nut on there. We're going to need that later to put it back together. Next, we are going to go back to the faceplate with our 3/8 inch socket, and we're going to back these 2 screws all the way off. And when we do that, we're going to separate the motor away from the faceplate, and it'll slide right off. Then we're going to get a razor knife, and we're going to cut that duct tape. I leave the duct tape on and just make an incision so that the dome filter can be pulled off. Bring the new motor in, screw it back on just the same way that we took it off. Get the dome filter. It feels like it snaps on and it's secure, but it really does need a piece of duct tape to stay in place. Otherwise, it'll be at risk of falling off. And then with the new motor in place, we have 4 connections that we're going to physically make. The first connection is the ground onto the faceplate, and then we're going to go from the hot side of the incoming 115 volts, and we're going to go over to the speed control board. And then we come out of the speed control board and we go into the lead that goes to the motor, and then we come out of the motor and then go over to the common side or neutral on the 115 volts. So it's almost like a series circuit with power coming in on 115 volts going to the board, from our board to the motor, from the motor to neutral, with the two elements in the series circuit being first the speed control board, and then the second one the motor itself, and then of course being sure to establish a good ground. The two little leads, red and black, smaller gauge, 16 gauge, just go out to that speed potentiometer. So the speed pot back in, the nut on, knob on with the screwdriver, these three connections made with some wire lugs. The motor's ready to go and to be reassembled. We just get the housing over, and there is an orientation for an up and down the filter across the top, and the motor is placed into the housing, making sure that all the wires are interior and clear, not getting pinched into the assembly process. And I'm not going to put those screws back on, but that would actually complete the process. If there's questions about on the incoming power of which one of those wires is the hot, you can put your black on your ground, and then you can find your neutral, and you can find your 120 volts using a typical digital multimeter. Remember, our 120 volt hot went to the speed control, and then we went from the speed control to the motor, and from the motor to the neutral. And that pretty much wraps this up on how to replace the motor. Give us a call, 800-777-5899, if there's any questions about this. Thanks very much for your interest.